What does AI even stand for? What
Artificial intelligence.
Yeah, that. I can't even think of it, Dana. I don't have any intelligence, let alone artificial intelligence tonight. It's just one of those nights, Dana. What's going on?
4 episodes left. Welcome to Damnit Jim, the podcast, a fun and fascinating look at the amazing Star Trek, the original series. My name is Dana Smith, taking the con to guide us through this episode. And with me, as always, our Rear Admiral of Buffoonery, my good friend, Dan Calzaretta. Good evening, Dan.
Hey, Herbert. Dana.
Herbert.
Have you ever been called Herbert at work?
No, not even close.
Really?
No.
No, it's good. That'll all make sense. As we get into this episode, that will all make sense. But what? I'm now the Rear Admiral of Buffoonery? That's awesome. I like that. You could be the captain of chicanery.
It's tough to give yourself a nickname.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Did you ever have a nickname that you'd want to share?
No, I never did have a nickname. I mean, my mom would call me Danny.
Yeah.
But never had a nickname. How about you?
Had a couple. One I didn't like.
Wait, well, you got to share now, Dana. Come on. We've known these people for 3 years almost here.
Yeah, well, that's okay. They can just wait. Yeah, and actually you gave me a nickname.
I did. I don't even remember. What was it?
Doc.
Oh, Doc. Yes. Yeah. Doc. Yeah.
I had another one where I started a job and I was kind of the oldest guy there. So I was either called Gramps or Old Man. And I wasn't even that old at that time. I was in my 40s still. So
Wow. What are you now? Like you'd be...
Yeah, Methuselah. Yeah.
Nice one. So how are you doing though?
Oh, pretty good.
Yeah.
Gonna take a trip here. We're gonna go on a driving trip. We're going to the Southwest. So
nice.
We're gonna go see the Grand Canyon and some other places down there.
I've never been to the Grand Canyon. Have you been there before?
I have. It's just amazing. Pictures just cannot do it justice.
Yeah, it's just kind of a big hole in the ground, right?
Yeah, kind of.
Sometimes you hear these stories about couples that go to the Grand Canyon and one of them just happens to fall. I'm putting that in quotes.
Yeah, I'm tying a rope around my waist and my wife's. So if she goes to push me, she's coming with me.
She would never do that, Dana. She's a wonderful woman.
She is.
Well, have a great time. That sounds like it'll be fun. So that means next week we are doing an encore episode.
Yes.
Okay.
Wonder if anybody will write in and make a suggestion.
I'd love to hear a suggestion for an encore episode. Could be any episode, maybe just from the first 2 seasons. So if you could call us by Tuesday, I would say that would be fantastic. I mean, they could call, they could email.
Yeah, the phone number that we have does not take texts.
No, it does.
It does?
Yeah, you can text it. Yeah.
Well, see, learn something new every day.
Sure.
How's things in Washington State?
Great. So this weekend in Walla Walla, we have the annual Balloon Stampede. It's fantastic. And the weather this weekend is going to be fantastic as well. Perfect for ballooning. The interesting thing is, though, most dogs hate hot air balloons. I don't mean riding in them. I mean, they're on the ground and the hot air balloon's going overhead and they just start barking.
Maybe they think it's like something's going to attack them.
Could be. I don't know. Or it's the dog overlords returning to take over the planet. I don't know. They go right over our house, though. They launch maybe a mile away. They go over our house at, I'd say, a couple 100 feet. I think the dogs hear the noise from the burner.
Yeah.
And then when the hot air balloon hits like the electric lines, they hear the screaming. That they don't like that.
Where I work, there's a lot of open fields and stuff. And so there would be hot air balloonists taking off. And there's one weekend where they do, during the summer, where they do a balloon race or whatever they call it. I went into work on a Saturday and I was getting out of my car and I hear this. And I look up and it's Mickey Mouse's head coming over the top of the building.
And you were thinking, crap, what did I put in my coffee this morning?
Was that agave or tequila? Yeah.
Have you ever gone up in a hot air balloon?
I have not. Have you?
No. Mm-mm.
Do you have any desire to?
I mean, I'm not against the idea. All right. Well, there we go. I mean, there's your podcast on hot air balloons today.
Next week, we'll be talking about Zeppelins. Yeah. So.
They should bring Zeppelins back. I think that would be a great way to travel.
There are Zeppelins that you can travel in. I saw an article about it not too long ago. This guy was starting this company to take people from like New York to DC or something like that and Zeppelins.
What happened?
Like I said, I read this several months ago, and then I have not seen anything more about it.
Well, they haven't seen this guy since then. They launched, and the wind changed direction, and there you go. Who knows where he is.
But they're saying they don't use hydrogen anymore.
Well, you wouldn't want to, right? I mean...
Was it helium?
I think it's hydrogen. Helium is what you breathe in from a balloon that you get at the grocery store. Can you imagine that if that was explosive? You breathe that in and then boom, take a puff of a cigarette and you just explode.
Yeah, they said it's not using hydrogen, and so it's the chances of exploding are much greatly reduced.
Right, but the chances of crashing are exactly the same. Hey, maybe we should talk about Star Trek. I don't know.
Yeah, I was going to say, what are we here for? Okay, Dan, should we get into the listener comments?
Yeah, let's do it.
Last week the episode was about lamb chop. I'm sorry, Requiem for Methuselah.
Requiem for lamb chop.
Ooh, with mint jelly. Yeah.
Hey, I don't know if I told you this, Dana. I hate lamb chop.
Yeah, something seems familiar with you saying that. So I'm guessing you said that before. So Sherry Gerson said, I love this episode. The Flink character is a favorite. So Bernard Hubbard said, one of the better, but not amongst the best of season 3 episodes. Okay, JT Costa said Shatner. I don't care if she's a robot. I'll kiss her. Lynn Price said, while Requiem for Methuselah was a bit far-fetched in certain areas, I guess that Flint could always create a new Reyna. So, Dan, do you have any emails or phone calls you want to share?
I do, Dana. So 2 weeks ago, we played the encore episode, City on the Edge of Forever. We did receive a couple of comments about that on YouTube. GA Philly fan says, this is the best of Trek. Really enjoy the podcast and hanging out with you guys. Is he here? Maybe he's watching us somehow. So Olaf Olafsson also commented on that episode. He said, should have brought Edith into the future. In the movie Generations, when Picard went to visit Kirk in the Nexus, Edith could have been there. That's a cool idea, Dana.
Yeah.
Bill from California emailed us about Requiem for Methuselah. He said, I completely agree with you that having Flint transfer the Enterprise to the castle was absolutely ridiculous and unnecessary to the plot. And Dana, our friend Lou from Canada emailed us as well. He said, squee!
Is that a Canadian term?
I was delighted with the shirt. Oh, maybe it's like a sound of joy. Let's just call it a sound of joy. Squee! I was delighted with the shirt. Just for that, I'm going to be extra nice to you this week. That's just to Dana. Actually, I'm not sure which one of you sent it. Fine, I'll be a good boy to both of you. Well, thank you, Lou. I was the one who sent the shirt, so.
And the return address says Colorado. And we've only stated what states we're in about 1,000 times. So
that was Dana who sent it. And then finally, we received several phone calls this week, Dana, but I've got time only to play one. Here is what the unnamed caller said.
I got to stop listening to you guys on the way to work.
Dana, I'm not sure why he needs to stop listening to us on the way to work, but maybe it's that we're distracting.
It's dangerous, Dan. I mean, we have had several people tell us that they've almost been in accidents because they're laughing so hard and not paying attention to what they're doing. We did a PSA announcement for that.
Funny that you bring it up, Dana. I think it's time to once again break out that public service announcement about listening to us while driving. Studies show that listening to Damnit Jim the podcast while driving has the same effect as driving high, except you don't get the munchies listening to Damnit Jim. Do your fellow drivers a favor. Listen to Damnit Jim at home and not while driving. Then you can eat all the Doritos or Jiffy Pop you want. This message has been brought to you by the Ad Council and the Damnit Jim podcast. Rattle Jar Productions and its affiliates and sponsors are not responsible for any accidents that might happen while listening to Damnit Jim the podcast, including traffic accidents, ballooning accidents, bicycling accidents, rollerblading accidents, choking on Doritos or Jiffy Pop or other snacks, or falling off the toilet while listening to Damnit Jim the podcast. Stay safe out there and live long and prosper.
Good sound advice, Dan. I hope our listeners are paying attention.
But not while driving.
Yeah.
Dana, that's all I have for this week. This podcast is being brought to you by North Shore Adult Diapers. North Shore offers reassuringly strong protection for even the heaviest control problems and can keep you dry and confident for up to 12 hours, so you can live your life with freedom and dignity.
Whether you are attending a baseball game, having dinner with friends, getting on a plane, or just sitting back listening to the Damnit Jim podcast, the last thing you want to worry about is incontinence. Don't be trapped at home. Be secure in knowing that North Shore has you covered with a true quality product.
You can even put North Shore's products to the test by requesting up to 6 product samples. And Dana, our listeners can use the code KIRK at checkout to receive $10 off their next order over $50. Go to northshore.com today to place your order or request product samples. This offer can be used only once per customer and may not be combined with other offers.
Dan, as I mentioned before, there's only 4 episodes left. Let's start the discussion. Season 3, episode 20, The Way to Eden. We see a small ship, kind of looks like a bus with nacelles. So the Enterprise is close behind. Spock says it's definitely a stolen ship and orders the tractor beam ready. You know, that's a phrase I always kind of thought was weird, tractor beam.
Yeah. Dana, actually, tractor beam comes from a novel written in 1931 called Space Hounds of IPC by E.E. Smith.
Well, maybe he's a relation of mine.
Yeah, could be. Yeah. It was actually an update of his earlier term, attractor beam. And that's what Kirk uses. He calls it his attractor beam.
He's got a certain magnetism about him. Yeah.
He does.
So Chekov says if they continue on this course, they'll go into Romulan space.
Oh, so we got that kind of hanging over us right now.
So they engage the tractor beam. Kirk hails them again, saying they must cut power. They are overtaxing their ship. Kirk calls Scotty, who just, for some reason, happens to be in the transporter room.
Well, he was kind of cleaning the console, it looked like. You know, it was dirty from people who shouldn't be using it, beaming themselves, you know, on the ship, off the ship, all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe he was doing something like, I'll put the lock on this thing so nobody can use it but me.
It only took me 3 years to figure that out.
So Chekov says they are not in transporter range yet. And Spock says
Nope. Say it again, please.
Chekov says they are not in transporter range yet.
Hey, look, I can't do it at all. So what am I complaining about?
So Spock says the ship's engines are approaching critical. Explosion is imminent.
But why didn't they look? The Enterprise is fast, right? Why did they just pull right up next to it? Don't even use the tractor beam. Just kind of get right next to it and beam the people off the ship.
Or like phaser their nacelles. Make it so they can't run away.
Yeah, just damage them a little bit, right?
Yeah.
That's a good point, too, yeah.
So just before the ship explodes, they engage the transporters. Kirk calls to Scotty asking if they're aboard. Kirk really seems concerned that they, blew up and didn't get anybody off the ship.
Scotty's like, Captain, they're here, but they're a little bit singed. That didn't sound like Scotty.
The people on the transporter pads turned towards Scotty. They were all facing away for the most part, each with their hands together to form I call it like an O.
Yeah.
And they look like hippies. And the guy in front is bald with big wing-like ears.
Huge ears.
And they walk off the transporter and sit down on the floor. On the bridge, Kirk says, Scotty, take them to the briefing room. And we hear a woman's voice say, we are not in the mood, Herbert. And Chekov gets this look on his face and says, Arena?
Like, how? Come on. Well, he would recognize that voice. I mean...
Yeah, do you ever get like somebody like you used to know from like just 5-6 years ago and they call you on the phone and it's like, hey, Dan, how's it going? And you're like all the time wondering who the hell it is you're talking to.
I mean, it happens every time my wife calls me. I don't even know who it is.
Well, that's a whole different problem. Anyway.
That is true. Yeah.
Kirk says he'll come down to the transporter room and take Spock with him. A moment later, Kirk and Spock enter the transporter room as the space hippies are chanting, no, go, no, go, no, go. Kirk asks, which one is Tongo Rad? So this guy stands up with whitish purple hair and bushy purple eyebrows. And Kirk says, you can thank your father's influence for the fact you're not under arrest. And Rad says, you got a hard lip, Herbert. And then Rad just sits down.
Sure, that's what I would do.
Kirk goes back to Spock and tells him to take them to sickbay. Spock steps towards the group and gives that hand signal, the big O. The hippies all respond by giving the hand signal back to Spock. And Spock says, one. The guy with the big ears and bald head stands and says, we are one. And a red-haired, curly-haired guy says, are you one, Herbert? And Spock very calmly says, I am not Herbert. So the red-headed guy says, he is not Herbert. We reach.
My God, Dana.
Spock asks them to state your purpose and your objectives, and the bald-headed leader says, we turn our backs on confusion and seek the beginning. He says their destination is the planet Eden. Kirk steps forward saying that planet is a myth. And the bald-headed guy takes a more serious tone and says, and we protest against being harassed, pursued, attacked, seized, and transported here against our wishes.
Yeah, but hold on. Didn't they steal the ship?
Yeah, he's overlooking some of that. Yeah,
Yeah.
And the redheaded guy says, right, brother. It's just, this language is killing me. So the bald-headed guy says, they do not recognize the Federation or its laws. Kirk says, well, whether you recognize authority or not, I am it on this ship. So the redheaded guy says,
oh, Herbert, you are stiff. Herbert, 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 Herbert.
Dana, what did he mean by, oh, Herbert, you are stiff?
that he's not bending, he's not helpful. On the bridge, Kirk orders Lieutenant Palmer to contact Starbase and tell them about the prisoners. Chekov confesses, I think I know one of the people they brought on board. Irina Gillian.
I think it's Galyulin. Galyulin.
Galyulin. I can't even barely say Irina.
Irina Galyulin. Irina Galyulin. Irish.
Irina G is what we call her.
She's a rapper.
Yeah. We were in Starfleet Academy together.
It's a hard accent, Dana. It really is.
Kirk, somewhat dumbfounded, asks, one of those was in the Academy?
One of those. That was kind of mean.
Yeah, I thought so too. And Chekov says, yes, sir. She, it went Scottish again. Yes, sir. So he says, she dropped out. Kirk gives him permission to leave his post because Kirk didn't want to hear this anymore. So
He didn't want to hear this bad accent anymore. Just leave. Just go. Just get out of here. I'm going to see Lydia. Lydia Galyulin.
it's not
Galyulin.
Lydia. It's Irina.
Oh, Irina. Her sister, Lydia.
So Kirk goes to Spock and says, Mr. Spock, do they really believe that Eden exists? And Spock says, many myths are based on truth, and they're not unintelligent. Their leader, Dr. Severin, a brilliant research engineer in the fields of acoustics, communications, and electronics on Tiburon, or Tiburon.
I think it's Tiburon. Actually, I've got no idea. I'm just joking. I really don't know what it is.
And he was dismissed from his post when he started this movement. And he left the movement there.
Dana, that movement was brought to you by North Shore Adult Diapers.
And there's going to be several more to come.
Oh, yeah. There's this episode's full of them. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then Spock adds, Tong Rad inherits his father's extraordinary abilities in the field of space studies.
Oh, so the idea is here that these are really smart people.
Sure.
Yeah.
So Kirk kind of scoffs. And he says they rejected all the technology and they seek the primitive. And Spock says,
There are many who are uncomfortable with what we have created. It is almost a biological rebellion, a profound revulsion against the planned communities, the programming, the sterilized, artfully balanced atmospheres. They hunger for an Eden where spring comes.
I like that concept that he puts out there. I don't know if that's the same one the hippies are following, but I mean, I like the way he expressed that.
Well, what is this, Ted Kaczynski that they're talking about? Maybe he watched this episode, Dana.
Maybe, maybe because he kept journals and stuff, and so maybe somewhere in the journals it's like, I started this in 1969 after watching Spock explain what I needed to know.
I'm pretty sure he did. I'm pretty sure I read that once that we should get him on the show, Dana.
We need to do the seance then. Yeah. So.
Oh, he's dead?
Yeah, he just died like a year or two ago.
Oh, we're just a little too late. He would have been on the show, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. Calling maximum security prison. Who do you want to speak to?
Could I speak with the Unabomber, please? Yeah, hold on. I'll get him for you. Hold on a second. Hey, this is Ted Kaczynski. How you doing? Who is this?
This is Ted.
It's Ted. Oh, the Damnit Jim Podcast. Oh, we smuggle that in all the time. You guys are great. We love you here. Oh God, can you imagine?
I mean, if you want to get other people like that, I'm sure we can. Some of our listeners might be rejecting the planned communities and the programming that's on Spotify and that they are listening to right now.
That would be great if we could get someone to do that. Well, in Walla Walla, we got the Green River Killer right out here at the penitentiary.
Oh, yeah.
He's just a killer. He's not like rejecting society, per se.
No, he wanted to be a bigger part of society, just trying to make more room for himself.
Yeah, he's right here, just about 3 miles away from where I sit.
Wow. So anyway, Kirk says, all do. The cave is deep in our memory.
What cave? What is he talking about?
Being primitive again, I think.
He's not thinking about caves that might be on Uranus, is he? It's usually just one big cave, Dana.
Yeah, I'm at a loss for words on how to reply to that. So it's
Sorry.
Kirk looks around the bridge quickly, then asks, what makes you so sympathetic towards them? And Spock says, it is not sympathy so much as curiosity, Captain, a wish to understand. They regard themselves as aliens in their own worlds, a condition with which I am somewhat familiar.
That was a great line.
Yeah.
Maybe the best line of this episode.
Tough to beat Herbert.
I mean, besides Herbert. Herbert's definitely the best. You're right.
So Kirk nods and he looks around again. And it's like he and Spock are sharing a secret here. And it says,
Herbert was a minor official, notorious for his rigid and limited patterns of thought.
Well, I shall try to be less rigid in my thinking.
Oh, he's still going to be rigid, just not in his thinking.
So in sickbay, the guy with the red hair and the blue toga-like outfit is playing something that looks like a crossbow turned into a guitar.
Yeah.
He starts singing a song about looking for the good land.
The songs in this episode, Dana, are great.
I gotta get this soundtrack, yeah. As the song ends, Chekov comes in and asks for Irina.
Not Lydia, though.
No, and he's done with Lydia. He doesn't like the tattooed lady stuff. So the redheaded guy says, she's getting her physical.
Gonna crack my knuckles and jump for joy. I got a clean bill of health from Dr. McCoy. You know, Irina?
What the hell is happening here, Dana?
Irina comes in and sees Chekov, and she walks up to Chekov and says, Pavel Andreevich, I had thought we might encounter each other.
Except she says it in a really bad accent, like worse than Chekov's even.
Oh, I thought my accent there was better than hers. So
yeah, it was. I mean, she really's got the vampire thing kind of going here, I thought.
Yeah. If I could do the vampire thing, I can do Russian.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Let's try it.
So Chekov says, you knew I was on the Enterprise?
That was good. That one was actually good. This is how I would say it. You knew I was on the Enterprise.
Chekov looks around at the others and asks her to follow him. They step out in the hallway. Chekov says, how could you do this to yourself? And he says, you were a scientist. And now, look at you. And Irina says, look at yourself, Pavel. And Chekov says, why did you do it?
Well, this goes on for a while. Like they have a lot of dialogue in this episode, these two. Wait, okay, so just to get this clear in my head, because I'm already confused with all this. They went to Starfleet classes together?
Yeah, and apparently had some kind of romantic relationship.
So they were kind of had a thing going. And then he went off and joined Starfleet, and she became like a space hippie.
She was like, one of those dropouts that, we all met them in college. They were really smart, but had kind of different ideas, and they could pass classes really easily, but it was just boring to them, and they had other ideas.
Yeah, that was me.
Yeah, I had other ideas too. It was like, get to know my bartenders better.
Except I didn't pass all my classes. That was the problem.
For a while, I forgot I was taking classes. And,
it's a long time ago, Dana. Long time ago.
Chekov takes her into a room.
Mm-hmm.
Chekov asks why she went away, and she says, I didn't. You did. And she says, you'll always be like this, so correct, yet inside you struggle. And Chekov just says, go to your friends. And she looks a little hurt, then she gets up and leaves.
Dana, the dialogue between these two, it goes on and on. I mean, it may be even worse than when Kirk kind of goes on about stuff.
So after she leaves, Chekov hears voices in the hall, and it sounds like there's a commotion. So he gets up and goes out in the hall and sees the hippies down the hallway being held back by 2 security guards. And he runs down the hall and tries to keep the hippies at bay. It looks like they're trying to get into sick bay.
Well, they're trying to rescue Severin, right?
Yeah, that's what I took it to be. So next we see Kirk going past the hippies into sick bay, and Chapel says, I thought all the animals were kept in cages.
Oh my God, that was bad.
Pretty harsh.
Normally she's kind of an empathetic person.
So Kirk goes to McCoy, who is next to Severin, as the 2 med techs seem to be holding Severin from getting up. Kirk asks, what's going on? And McCoy says, trouble. Your friend here didn't want a checkup. Turns out there's a reason. There's a nasty little bug evolved in the last few years, Jim. Our aseptic, sterilized civilizations produced it. Synthococcus novae.
Wow, that's pretty good.
Doing a mic drop and walking away. McCoy goes on, it's deadly. We can immunize against it, but haven't learned to lick all the problems yet. Kirk says, does he have it? What about the others? McCoy says, all the others are clear. He doesn't have it. He's a carrier. Remember your ancient history, Typhoid Mary? He's immune, as she was, but he carries the disease and spreads it to others.
Sure, Typhoid Mary, in modern times, Gonorrhea Jim. Remember the story about him? Well, you are him.
Oh, yeah.
I guess we didn't tell you, Jim, but we're telling that story all over the galaxy.
Yeah, you're well known.
Even the Romulans know it.
And Severin says, this is outrageous. You're not isolating me. You're imprisoning me. You invent a crime, find me guilty, and sentence me. And Kirk says, put him in isolation. So the 2 med techs haul Severin away. Kirk leaves, and in the hallway, the hippies are on the floor showing the 1 sign. One of the space hippies is talking to Sulu.
You don't belong with them. You know what we want. You want it too. Come, join us.
How do you know what I want?
You're young. Think young, brother.
You make it tempting.
And all through this, Sulu's just got this giant grin on his face.
Yeah.
But it's weird when they cut back to Kirk, his image is reversed.
It was very weird, Dana. Like the part was on the wrong side.
Yeah, the Star Trek emblem's on his right side.
I noticed that too. I had to go back and look at it a couple times. At first I thought, what am I, hallucinating here or what's happening?
Must have been some of those space mushrooms you were taking. So.
Yeah.
And Kirk turns to the people, the other space hippies, and says, Dr. Severin will be released when we think he is medically safe. And Adam, the red-haired guy, starts singing again.
Stiff man putting my mind in jail, and the judge bang the gavel and say no bail. Gonna lick his hand and wag my tail.
Kirk asks Spock to help him get these people to behave, and Spock says he'll try. So next we see Spock is standing outside of Severin's cell. Severin is sitting cross-legged on the bed, and he says he has no control over his people. Spock makes an argument that he can help Severin and his people find Eden, but they must try to be a little bit more under control, and otherwise they'll be considered criminals, and the Federation will not allow criminals to colonize a planet. Yeah, what do you think this is, Australia or something?
So do you think they would just let them pick a planet, like any planet, and just say, yeah, we want to colonize this thing?
I just find that hard to believe.
Me too.
So back on the bridge, Spock is speaking to Kirk, and Spock says Severin is insane. He's nuts. He's crazy. His train is run off the tracks. He's a few bricks short of a load. He's bananas, I tell you. He's unhinged. He's got bats in his belfry. He's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. And Kirk says,
What are you saying, Spock?
Not quite getting your point, Spock. So he says he'll have McCoy check him out. He adds, I'm sorry. I know you have great respect for him. And Spock replies, his condition does not affect my interest in the movement. There is no insanity in what they seek. Then he says, I made a promise which I should like to keep. Then he asks if he can locate Eden. And he says, I shall work in my quarters, and asks for Chekov to work in auxiliary control. So get another captain's log. Now it's 5832.6.
Man, he's dropped several logs in this episode, Dana. Maybe more in this episode than any other.
That's what I was wondering. Usually just does like 2.
Yeah. Maybe he's taken some laxative and he just has more captain's logs.
Yeah, or maybe they're not logs. Maybe it's just running freely.
It's a captain's stream of consciousness. And you know what he needs, Dana? North Shore adult diapers.
Says, I have asked Dr. McCoy to check Starfleet medical records to verify Mr. Spock's suspicion that Dr. Severin is insane. So next we see Spock in his quarters, and Adam comes in and says, am I crossing you? And Spock says no. And he says, and he sees Spock's lyre on the shelf and asks if he plays. And Spock nods, and Adam asks to check it out. And he plays briefly on it and says, oh, wow. He goes, that's now. That's real now. He says, I reach that, brother. I really do. Give.
Hey, how about a session? You and us, it would sound. That's what I came for. I wanted to ask, great white captain upstairs, but he don't reach us. But would he shake on a session? I mean, we want to cooperate like you asked, so I'm asking.
If I understand you correctly, I believe the answer might be yes.
So Adam seems quite excited and gives the signal for 1 as he walks out.
But do you think Spock is that hip? You know what I'm saying?
I think he's trying to appreciate their situation.
Yeah.
Don't think he's that hip. So next we go to auxiliary control, and Chekov is working, and Irina just walks in.
You know this is not going to end well, Dana.
Why would you want the door to auxiliary control locked?
Right. Especially with people on the ship who've already stolen one ship. We know they know how to fly the thing.
So she says she's been looking for him, and she asks what room this is, and Chekov answers, auxiliary control.
In fact, let me tell you exactly how you could run the ship from here.
Yeah, and she asks, what's it for? And he says, it's the main control room. Should the main control break down or suffer damage, we can navigate the ship from here.
Spill the beans.
She says she came to apologize, and she says she doesn't like being angry with him. They draw closer, and they keep talking. And he's saying, I'm assisting Mr. Spock in locating your Eden. Chekov explains he's going through the star charts, project orbits of various planets. And she's like, oh, how do you know all these things? And, well, I finished fucking school for one thing.
Well, you're off smoking the space ganja. I was studying.
They're like getting closer and closer. And so Spock calls to Chekov and says, I'm not receiving Mr. Chekov.
Chekov is, though.
It's Spockus interruptus. Yeah. So Spock repeats his call, and Chekov breaks the kiss and sits back in the chair. And he says, I was momentarily delayed. So we go back to the room where the hippies are. Irina comes in and says, everything can be handled from auxiliary control.
I mean, once again, Dana, here we have these people on a ship that probably should not be just wandering around. And then Chekov tells her exactly how the ship is operated from auxiliary control.
It's probably he didn't label the buttons for her. I mean,
I think these people have short-term memory problems. I don't know if it's being in space too long or what, but they can't remember from one episode to the next about when this has always gone bad.
Oh, what could possibly happen, Dan?
Yeah, nothing.
So later in the rec room, Adam is playing a song. Several crew members are coming in and watching. The music plays throughout the ship. The guard outside Severin's cell is like jamming out. He's kind of like bopping his head.
Right.
And we see one of the engineers on the bridge is bouncing to the music.
I just was wishing Scotty would just slap him right there.
Just knock him right out of the chair.
Yeah.
Just like total Mabinga him. Yeah.
By the way, this song, I'm going to play the entire thing at the end of the podcast because I think it's really important for people to hear it. It's too long to put in the middle, but make sure when you get to the end of the podcast, listen to this entire song. It's classic. It's so bad. I mean, good.
Spock comes into the rec room with his lyre, and they start jamming. And we see the guard outside of Severin's cell, and he's got his eyes closed, and he's kind of bobbing his head to the music. Rad comes up and knocks out the guard by placing his thumbs at the base of the guard's skull.
Now, is that a real thing? Can you really knock someone out by doing that?
I don't think so. On the bridge, Scotty looks at this engineer that's still rocking to the music, and we see Sulu is also enjoying the music. His head's kind of bobbing along.
Dana, why, in God's name, are they playing this music all over the ship? Why is it on the intercom, Dana? I mean, you think they're broadcasting it to the Romulans too? And the Romulans are on the other side of the neutral zone, just kind of, jamming out, however a Romulan would do that.
Yeah. If sound traveled through space, they'd have speakers on the outside of the ship just jamming it out. Yeah, so.
I still don't know why they're playing it throughout the ship.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
No.
Yeah, I'd just keep it confined to the rec room. I mean, do you think that they're getting like people are, calling up to the bridge? Hey, I hear the hippies are playing music. I want to hear it throughout the ship, man.
It's not fair, man, that I can't be down there, dude, with the hippies.
Got a stiff lip, dude.
We would not make good hippies, Dana.
So in auxiliary control, Severin and Rad open the door, and the guy that's at the controls doesn't even move. He doesn't pay attention. It's like,
well, he's been jamming out to the music.
Yeah, but the music wasn't playing that loud. He didn't have headphones on or anything. So Rad goes up and puts his thumbs on the base of the guy's skull, and the guy falls down.
And both of the guys that pass out, they make this "oh" sound.
Yeah, a little "ooh." So we see Severin and Rad start working auxiliary control. I always think auxiliary control must be easier to run than the transporter, because everybody can run it. So we see the ship turn, and Sulu reports he no longer seems to have control of the ship. Scotty comes up and checks the board and says, "It's auxiliary control." And Kirk tries calling auxiliary control as Sulu says, "It seems someone else is running the ship."
No, really? Wow, that was a brilliant freaking deduction.
Yeah, it's like, well, you just got demoted, Sulu. That's the stupidest thing you said. So Severin's voice can be heard. It says, "That's right. Someone else is running this ship." We go to auxiliary control and see all of Severin's followers are there with him.
Well, they just jammed in there.
And Severin says, "I am all functions, life support as well. You cannot interfere as I have frozen the doors to the control room." Kirk turns to Spock and says, "Can he do it?" And Spock's like, "What are you, stupid? Everybody can do this." It's like, this happens like every 7th episode. It's like,
do you remember a guy by the name of, Khan?
So Sulu says, "We're leaving the neutral zone and headed into Romulan space."
Oh, so they got out of the neutral zone and now they're heading back in.
Just then Rad says, "They've located Eden." He says they'll be there in 3 hours, and Severin gets up and goes to a wall where he takes a panel off. Severin is moving around pieces on a panel. I think it looks like he's playing Battleship.
I thought the same thing.
We just see him doing this, and then all of a sudden Rad says they are approaching Eden, right on the dot.
Well, that was going to be 3 hours.
Yeah, well, time flies when you're having fun. And
or you're trying to destroy the Enterprise.
Yeah. And Arena asks about what Severin did. And Severin says, "Well, I'm using sound against them beyond the ultrasonic. It will stun them and allow us time to leave."
Oh, that's why the whole thing about him being like an acoustic genius earlier in the episode.
Exactly. And then he says, "We'll go down in one of their shuttlecrafts."
Why not just beam down?
Yeah. Everybody and their brother can operate the transporter.
Faster? Get down there faster?
Yeah. So we hear a noise and see something burning the wall. In the hallway, we see Scotty with a phaser burning a hole in the wall.
Oh, yeah.
Inside, Severin flips a switch, and we see Spock is immediately affected. He looks pained. Kirk tries to help him. Then Kirk grabs his own ears and falls. And we hear another thud. And when the camera pulls back, we see Scotty's passed out. Later, we see Scotty, Kirk, and Spock waking up in the hallway. Spock tries to tell Kirk that they have to stop the ultrasonics. Kirk staggers into auxiliary control and turns the sound off. Kirk calls to engineering, then to the bridge, but gets no response. Finally, Sulu answers. And Kirk asks if they have control of the ship. He's in auxiliary control at the control panel.
Right.
He would know if they have control of the ship.
And he could just flip the one switch that says return control to bridge.
So little things that piss me off, Dan. So then the hangar deck calls and reports one of the shuttles is missing. Kirk says they'll beam down and he gives Scotty the con. So we see them beam down. The area looks beautiful. So Kirk tells everyone to spread out and use caution. Kirk tries calling Severin on the communicator. Just then Chekov screams. Remember, we talked about this before. Chekov is the official screamer of the Enterprise.
That's right. Yeah, we haven't heard him scream recently, but yeah, you're right. I forgot about that.
So Kirk and McCoy run to him. Chekov's hand is burned. I actually thought what they did with the makeup looked pretty good.
Yeah, that was good. Yeah. Dana, maybe they really did burn it. I mean, maybe he was willing to give it all for this episode.
Yeah, real method acting. Yeah, here, let's pour some acid on your hand, see how that goes.
He wanted a very authentic response, Dana.
Yeah. So McCoy scans the flower and says, all the plant life is full of acid, even the grass. So don't be smoking it. That's
I got some acid on the ship for you, though, Jim. Well, you think those hippies are going crazy? Woo! We get back up there. We'll write some music.
So Kirk asks if their clothes will protect them, and McCoy says it should for a little while.
But those hippies are probably using this stuff as toilet paper.
Spock calls Kirk over, and we see Adam on the ground. And as they scan over his body, because they started his feet and scan over his body, his fingers on his left hand move.
Yes.
Did you see that?
I did. And he's supposed to be dead.
So McCoy comes over and checks him. McCoy really pissed me off because he just said, poison, the fruit is deadly. Didn't say he's dead, Jim.
Well, what they should have said was, he's not quite dead, Jim. His hand's still moving. Let's stick some more of that fruit in his throat.
Yeah. Here, well, give me your phaser and, want to put him out of his misery.
How could they miss that, Dana? How could they miss? I mean, we saw it. And it was so obvious that his fingers were moving.
So then Kirk spies the shuttlecraft, and so they start towards it. So Kirk opens the door of the Galileo, and we see Arena and the others have burned feet.
Nasty, too. They were gross.
So Severin comes out, and his feet are worse than anyone's. So Spock calls up to the Enterprise for a medical team to the transporter. Severin says, no, we're not leaving Eden. And he takes off running and climbs a tree. And with burned feet.
Yeah.
I mean, running was bad enough, but then to climb a tree. And of course, he reaches out and grabs a piece of the fruit, same thing that Adam ate.
Yeah.
Severin takes a bite of the fruit, and then he falls from the tree. They run to him, but it's too late. He's dead. Back on the Enterprise, Kirk tells Palmer they have 4 to beam down and mark the incident closed.
Wait, they're sending him back to the planet?
They're at a starbase, I think.
Oh, maybe they're just giving him to the Romulans. Here you go. Good luck.
Enjoy the music. So Kirk calls the transporter room, and Scotty says they have 3, and they're waiting on the 4th. So Kirk goes to Chekov and asks if he wants to attend, and Chekov apologizes for his behavior and says he submits himself for disciplinary action.
Well, that's what Kirk is saying. Go see Arena, and she can discipline you.
I didn't think Chekov, other than giving away all the secrets of the auxiliary control, he didn't do anything wrong.
And also, over here is panel. Take cover off, twist little knobs, plug in things that look like battleship. It's to make our ears hurt. God, that was a horrible, horrible Chekov.
You had moments.
Yeah, when I stopped, you're like, wow, that's the best Russian pause I've ever heard in my life.
The ultimate Russian pause.
It's a whole thing by Anton Chekov called the Russian Pause. It was a famous play of his, actually. Went on for days, but...
Yeah, I was going to say, people just start to talk, but then don't. And then just,
In fact, people wish that this podcast was called Star Trek The Pause.
I think they're just wishing to be Star Trek The End. But So Chekov gets up and starts towards the turbo lift when Irina comes off the turbo lift. And again, she's just able to wander around through the ship.
Still barefoot, though, and her feet look fine.
McCoy is a miracle worker.
You're going to walk around on the carpet of the Enterprise that we have already established is nasty dirty. And you probably got skin kind of falling off and stuff. That's just not okay.
I agree with you. I didn't pay attention that she was barefoot. So thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So Spock steps up and says,
Ms. Galunin, it is my sincere wish that you do not give up your search for Eden. I have no doubt but that you will find it, or make it yourselves.
Thank you.
I'd like to think of you wandering the galaxy like a fucking idiot, looking for a planet that doesn't exist.
Playing really bad sitar music.
Yeah, now that you lost your guitar player, I don't know what you're going to do. So Kirk watches as Spock crosses to his station, and Kirk says, "We reach, Mr. Spock." And Dan, that's how the show ends.
Dana, you have some information about some of the people in this episode.
Well, Dan, I want to talk about Charles Napier, who played Adam. He's one of those guys who shows up and you know him, but you can't remember his name. He's had roles in TV and film. He was actually in the Blues Brothers.
I love him in the Blues Brothers.
Yeah, great in that. And he was actually a musician. He was also in Silence of the Lambs, one of the guards that gets killed by Hannibal Lecter.
Was he really? I didn't realize that.
And then he was also in First Blood Part 2 and in Austin Powers. He's got a little bit part in Austin Powers.
Really?
He was in TV shows like Mission Impossible, The Rockford Files, Dukes of Hazzard, Night Court, CSI, and Cold Case, just to mention a few. He also provided the growls for the Incredible Hulk TV series.
Wait, just the growl like noise?
Yeah, that the Hulk made when he'd like, he did that.
Like he's known for that? That's great.
I wish I could be known for that.
Yeah.
And he lived quite the life. You should check out his quotes on the imdb.com page. You'll be amazed. He lived a full life, lived a very interesting life. I also read an article before about his daughter that she wrote where she said that he was just a good soul, loved music, had lots of friends, including friends like Hunter S. Thompson and John Belushi.
Wow.
And he just loved acting. Sadly, Napier died in 2011 at the age of 75.
Wow, it's too bad.
Dan, do you have something you want to share about this episode as well?
Yeah, just kind of to follow up there a little bit. Charles Napier wrote 2 of the songs featured in The Way to Eden, along with Craig Robertson and Arthur Hindman. He performed the vocals for the songs. I'm going to play one of the entire songs, as I've already mentioned, at the end of the podcast. People should stick around for that, Dana. And also, this episode came from an idea by DC Fontana. She didn't like how the episode turned out, so she used that pseudonym that she's used a couple of times of Michael Richards in the credits.
A funny thing is that the original script that she wrote was called Joanna, and it was Dr. McCoy's estranged daughter who is part of the hippie group. And her and Kirk have a fling, go figure.
Of course they do.
Which doesn't sit well with McCoy. When they changed that, she got really upset because she really liked that idea.
Yeah, that would have been an interesting little twist, I think.
It sounded intriguing to me. I could see why she was upset with the change.
Yeah, but that's all I have, Dana.
Dan, do you want to talk themes and dilemmas?
Yeah, I have 2, Dana. One is young people rebelling against authority. And then the second is rebelling against modernity and technology. But that's also not kind of a new idea. We even have people today who are worried about things like, what does AI even stand for? What
Artificial intelligence.
Yeah, that I can't even think of it, Dana. I don't have any intelligence, let alone artificial intelligence tonight. It's just one of those nights, Dana. I don't know what's going on. So, people today worry about artificial intelligence. They worry about things like if we have our autonomy taken away from us and machines are making decisions for us, where does that leave us as humans? Those are the dilemmas that I see from this episode, Dana. What do you have?
I looked at it a little bit differently than you did. From Kirk's point of view, he's put in a position of finding a way to communicate to people who believe that they don't need his help, which is often the case with adults dealing with teenagers and, the more rebellious older for younger people. The story made me think of Timothy Leary, and he's the one who coined the phrase tune in, turn on, drop out, as well as if you don't like what you're doing, you can always pick your needle and move to another groove. So when you have those types of ideas and you are counterculture, counter to what is the norm, you can be considered dangerous to the rest of society.
Hey, Dana, how about if we move to the best and worst parts of this episode?
Yeah, sure, Dan.
What's the best part that you have, Dana?
Adam was a pretty unique character, and it was played really well by Charles Napier. How about you, Dan? Do you have a best part for us?
Exactly the same thing. I loved him in this episode. He was really the most redeeming part of the episode for me. How about another best part for you?
Chekov's former love interest and the way that all played out, because they represented the two lines, the one who went with the counterculture and the one that joined the norm. I like the way that they worked that in. Do you have another best part for us?
I do. The whole Herbert thing. I just love that. And how they came up with this idea that Herbert was a derogatory term, and they gave us the little backstory about him being some bureaucrat who was not very intelligent and very rigid in his thinking. I just love that. I would have been really interested to hear more about the backstory of that guy. I thought it would have been pretty cool. How about a worst part for you, Dana?
The music. It was kind of humorous, but it grew old fast, and doing, like whole songs was a little much. How about you, Dan? Do you have a worst part?
I did not find the dialogue between Chekov and Irina very compelling. Maybe the backstory was a little compelling. I just found the dialogue to just go on and on and on, Dana. How about another worst part for you?
2 words, Dan. Space hippies. Yeah, just, I remember seeing this as a kid and being like, what the hell are they doing? And just bothered me some. Do you have another worst part for us, Dan?
Once again, Dana, people come onto the ship. They're told how to take it over. For God's sake, why don't they have a microphone in the room where these people are staying and they could listen to every freaking thing they're saying,
Yeah, well, that would make sense.
And the people who are taking over the ship, they're listening to what Kirk is saying on the bridge, but for some reason, well, we don't want to violate people's rights and listen to what they're saying.
Even though they might overtake the ship or kill us all.
Right. Dana, how about another worst part for you?
Dan, Spock's desire to help them find Eden. I could see him being intrigued by it. I can't see him going out of his way to help them.
Dana, what happened on this day in history?
Dan, this was released on February 21st, 1969. The #1 song in the U.S. was still Everyday People by Sly and the Family Stone.
What, you mean it wasn't one of the songs from this episode? It probably takes a couple weeks.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's give it another week.
Okay.
And the #1 song in the UK was Where Do You Go to My Lovely by Peter Sarstedt. Also on this date, the second major setback for the Soviet Union's crewed lunar program happened as the most powerful Soviet rocket was launched for the first time. The rocket lifted off at 3:18 in the afternoon, only 70 seconds into its flight. Its 30 engines shut down by themselves or by a self-destruct order from ground control. The payload, a modified lunar spacecraft, separated and landed 21 miles from the site, and the rest fell 31 miles further away. And finally, a volcanic eruption began on Deception Island, the site of Antarctic research stations established by both the United Kingdom and by Chile. The blast triggered flooding, and by the time it ended, less than 48 hours later, the abandoned Chilean research station was destroyed, and the British station was so severely damaged that it had to be abandoned permanently. And that's all we got for on this day in history, Dan. This podcast is being brought to you by North Shore. North Shore offers premium incontinence products that can improve your quality of life. Managing incontinence can feel like a no-win scenario. Local drugstores often have a lack of options or sizes, or have cheap products that leak. North Shore is way different.
Dana, incontinence affects over 13 million people in the United States alone. I have a close friend with multiple sclerosis who uses North Shore diapers to help him lead a normal life.
North Shore products can empower you to live your life on your terms by providing maximum absorbency that allows you to be dry and confident. It allows you to be you. And Dan, our listeners can use the code KIRK at checkout to receive $10 off their next order over $50. Go to northshore.com today.
Dana, you want to move on to the counts?
Yeah, by all means, Dan.
All right. How about the dead crewman count tonight?
0. With the Space Hippies, I was pretty sure that wasn't going to happen, so we are still at 55.5.
All right. How about the shirtless Kirk, rip shirt Kirk count?
Nothing. He barely got into an argument, let alone a fight, so we are still at 20.
The he's dead count.
He had his chance but didn't say anything, and so we are still at 23.
Yeah, he really could have pulled the trigger there, Dana, but he didn't. How about I'm a doctor, not a fill in the blank?
No, I think he's done. I don't think he's going to do any more, and so we are still at 9.
Well, we only got 4 episodes, Dana, right? We're going to find out. How about the supreme being count?
Nope, nothing there. We are still at 12.
Violation of the prime directive count?
Nope. Yeah, so we're still at 12 there, Dan.
All right, taking over the Enterprise count.
We did get 1 this week, so that brings us up to 20.
And finally, who's commanding the Enterprise?
Now, Kirk left the bridge a couple times and took Spock with him, but the only time we saw anybody in charge or he said, "You have the con," was to Scotty. And so I just have 1, which puts us at 54.
Yeah, I've got the same. All right. Well, Dana, I got to say about this episode, I'm kind of 2 minds. One is, I think it's hilarious. But the problem is, Dana, I think it was unintentionally hilarious. This one, I don't think they meant it to be funny. I think they meant it to be some kind of social commentary. But whatever. I really liked this episode. I thought the songs were hilarious. I thought Charles Napier was great. You know, is it my favorite episode? No. Is it even in the top half? Probably not, but I enjoyed watching it, Dana.
Yeah, Dan, I know what you're saying. I was fully expecting to just ridicule the hell out of this show. It's been years since I've seen this episode. The thing is that as I watched it, I liked it. I mean, I didn't love it, but I liked it. It just surprised me on how the stories just played out.
Dana, I want to remind our listeners, I am going to play the song that was from this episode at the end. It is classic. You'll want to probably download it and put it in your playlist. Well, Dana, I had a great time tonight. Hey, have a good time in the American Southwest. Don't find yourself at the bottom of the Grand Canyon.
Do my best.
And if your wife asks you to sign for a new life insurance policy, I might just not want to do something like that. Have a great time, Dana.
All right. Thanks, Dan. And thanks, as always, to all our friends who communicate with us via Facebook, email, and phone messages. Don't forget our phone number. Dan, what is that?
509-676-6298.
We cannot fully express the appreciation we have for all the support we get. We are stunned by how much people have come out and cheered us on. Keep spreading the word, and we'll keep pushing on. Until we meet again, don't be a Herbert.
I'm talking about you. I'm talking about me. Long time back when the galaxy was new, man found out what he had to do. Found he had to eat and he found he had to drink, and a long time later he found he had to think. Yes, think. I'm standing here wondering.
What?
If a man tells another man, out of my way, he piles up trouble for himself all day. But all kinds of trouble come to an end when a man tells another man, be my friend. My friend. Well, what's it going to be?
There's a mile-wide emptiness between you and me.
Can't reach reach across it, hardly even see.
Someone ought to take a step one way or other.
Let's say goodbye, or let's say brother. Brother, brother. Hey, out there. Hey, out there. Hey, out there.
Hey, out there.
I see you.
I see you.
I see you.
I see you.
Let's get together and have some fun. I don't know how to do it, but it's got to be done.
Thanks once again for listening to Damnit Jim, the podcast. We'd love to hear from you. Please send us an email at damnitjimpodcast@gmail.com or join the discussion on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, or X. You can also call the Damnit Jim hotline at 509-676-6298. Enjoy the rest of your week, and as always, remember to live long and prosper. This has been a Ramble Jar production.